I found the photograph while working as an archivist at Wellesley College in Massachusetts. It was a Tuesday in March, one of those early spring days when winter hasn't quite released its grip, and the air still carries a bite of cold. I was in the basement archives, tasked with digitally restoring a collection of photographs from the college's early years. The photograph in question was from a 1905 graduation ceremony. A sepia-toned image showing a line of women in academic gowns and mortarboards walking outdoors during what appeared to be a graduation procession. The setting was bright and sunlit, with trees and a small crowd of onlookers in the background, giving it a celebratory, formal atmosphere. The women, likely in their late 20s, were dressed uniformly in flowing dark robes over white dresses, some smiling and conversing as they walked. I was working on cleaning up damage to the image, water stains, fading, the usual deterioration that comes with age, when I noticed something that made me freeze. One figure near the center of the procession was missing her head, not cropped out by damage to the photograph, not obscured by shadow or deterioration, simply gone. Her body was perfectly aligned and mid-stride, her academic robes flowing naturally, her posture suggesting she was walking and conversing like the others. But where her head should have been, there was only void, empty space, showing the trees and crowd behind her, as if her head had been erased from existence. I leaned closer to the screen, adjusting the magnification. The absence was complete and inexplicable. The collar of her white dress was visible. The mortarboard should have been on her head, but it too was absent. Above her shoulders was simply nothing, as clean an absence as if she had never had a head at all. I called over my supervisor, Dr. Patricia Morrison, to look at the image. "That's impossible," she said, staring at the screen. "That can't be photographic damage. The background shows through perfectly. It's as if she was photographed without a head." "Could it be a double exposure error?" I asked. "No. Look at the rest of the image. It's perfectly clear, perfectly exposed. And look at the women around her. They're not reacting to anything unusual. They're just walking in the procession, as if nothing is wrong." Dr. Morrison pulled up the file records. "This photograph came from a sealed box we just received from an estate donation. It's been in storage for decades. Let me check if there are other photos from the same event." She left to search the physical archives, while I continued examining the image. The more I looked at it, the more unsettling it became. The headless woman appeared completely normal in every other respect. Her body language natural, her position in the line appropriate, her gown properly arranged. Only her head was missing, creating a disturbing void in an otherwise ordinary graduation scene. Dr. Morrison returned an hour later with a folder containing additional photographs from the 1905 graduation ceremony. "I found 5 other images from the same day," she said. "Let's see if this woman appears in any of them." We began examining the additional photographs, and what we discovered made my blood run cold. In the first photograph, taken earlier in the day, showing graduates gathering before the ceremony, there was a figure at the far left edge of the frame. The image quality was poor in that area, but there appeared to be a woman whose head was strangely distorted, as if caught in motion blur. Yet everything else in the photograph was sharp and clear. In the second photograph, showing graduates walking toward the ceremony location, that same blurred figure appeared closer to the center of the group. The distortion around where her head should have been was more pronounced, creating a kind of shimmer or void that drew the eye. In the third photograph, the one I had been restoring, showing the actual procession, the woman appeared near the center of the line with her head completely absent. No blur, no distortion, just absence. It's as if she's becoming more absent with each photograph, Dr. Morrison said quietly. In the early images, there's some presence, distorted, but there. By the procession photo, she's completely headless. Let's look at the other two photos, I said, though I was beginning to dread what we might find. The fourth photograph showed graduates after the ceremony, standing together for a group portrait. The headless woman stood in the third row. But something was different. The void where her head should have been seemed darker, more pronounced, as if it were drawing in light rather than simply showing absence. The fifth and final photograph showed graduates leaving the ceremony area. And there, near the foreground of the image, closer to the camera than she had been in any previous photo, stood the headless woman. She appeared to be walking toward the photographer. Her body turned slightly, as if moving out of the line and approaching the camera directly. "She's getting closer," I said. In each successive photograph, she's moved closer to the camera. Dr. Morrison was pale. "This doesn't make sense. Let me check the graduation records for 1905. Maybe we can identify who this woman was supposed to be." Over the next week, Dr. Morrison and I searched through every graduation record, roster, and document from 1905. We counted the women in each photograph, cross-referenced names with faces, examined yearbooks and class lists. And we discovered something impossible. According to every official record, the number of graduates visible in the photographs was correct. The headless woman wasn't supposed to be there. There was no missing student, no unaccounted-for graduate. It was as if she existed in the photographs, but had never existed in reality. More disturbing, we found a note in the maintenance logs from June 1905, just days after graduation, indicating that a dormitory room on the third floor of Tower Hall had been sealed for urgent maintenance concerns and was not to be opened under any circumstances. The note gave no specifics, and the room remained sealed for 3 years before being reopened and returned to normal use. We found no record of what maintenance issue had required the room to be sealed, and we found no record of who had occupied that room during the 1904-1905 academic year. "It's as if someone was erased," Dr. Morrison said, "from the records, from history, from reality, everywhere except these photographs." "Should we report this?" I asked. "To someone?" "Report what?" "That we found photographs showing a woman with no head. That official records don't account for someone who clearly appears in images. No one would believe us. And honestly, I'm not sure I believe it myself." But then strange things began to happen. I was working late one evening, continuing to restore the graduation procession photograph, when I noticed something that hadn't been there before. The headless woman's position in the image seemed different, slightly closer to the camera than I remembered. I pulled up my earlier saved versions of the file to compare. In my first saved copy, the headless woman was in the third position, from the left in the line of graduates. In my most recent saved copy, she was in the second position, closer to the camera, closer to the viewer. I called Dr. Morrison, even though it was nearly 9 p.m. "The image is changing," I told her. "The headless woman is moving closer in the photograph." "That's impossible. Digital images don't change." I'm looking at multiple saved versions. She's definitely moved. And there's something else, where her head should be. There's something new, a darkness like in the later photos. It's as if the void is deepening. Dr. Morrison arrived at the archives within an hour. Together, we examined all the photographs again, comparing them to our earlier scans and notes. Every image had changed. The blurred figure in the early photographs was now more distinct, still headless, but clearer, more defined. The headless woman in the procession photo had moved from the third position to the second. And in the final photograph, the one showing graduates leaving the ceremony, she now appeared in the foreground, much closer to the camera, as if she had taken several steps toward the photographer since the image was originally captured. "This isn't possible," Dr. Morrison whispered. "Photographs don't change. Images captured over a century ago don't move." "Unless," I said slowly, "something in the photographs is still active, still moving, still approaching." We spent hours that night researching every detail we could find about the 1905 graduation, about Tower Hall, about any mysterious occurrences or unusual events from that period. We found very little, until we discovered a brief newspaper article from the Wellesley Town Crier, dated June 15th, 1905. Wellesley College administration has announced that a dormitory room in Tower Hall will be temporarily closed for maintenance. The closure comes just days after graduation ceremonies concluded. College officials declined to provide specifics about the nature of the maintenance required. And then, in the same newspaper, dated September 20th, 1905, residents of Tower Hall report unusual disturbances in recent weeks. Sounds of footsteps in sealed corridors, doors opening and closing in the night. And most disturbing, several students have reported seeing a figure in academic robes walking the third-floor hallway late at night. The figure appears normal, except that it has no head. When approached, the figure vanishes. College officials attribute these reports to overactive imaginations and the stress of beginning a new academic year. The reports of a headless figure continued sporadically through 1906 and 1907, then ceased entirely after the sealed room was reopened in 1908. "She was haunting the dormitory," I said. "The headless woman from the photographs. She was walking the halls." "But who was she?" Dr. Morrison asked. "And what happened to her?" We searched more deeply into the college's private archives, records not available to the general public. And in a locked file cabinet in the President's office archive, we found something that explained everything. A confidential report dated June 10th, 1905, written by the Dean of Students. "I write to document a tragedy that has befallen this institution. Miss Elizabeth Ashford, a graduating senior, was found dead in her dormitory room on the morning of June 9th, just hours before the graduation ceremony. The cause of death is uncertain, but the condition of the body is most disturbing. Her head is missing, apparently severed from her body, though no blood or signs of violence were found in the room. The head has not been located. Given the disturbing nature of this death and the proximity to graduation, President Hazard and I have decided to keep this matter confidential. Miss Ashford's name will be removed from all graduation records. Her family has agreed to this arrangement to avoid scandal. The official story will be that she fell ill and withdrew before graduation. Her dormitory room will be sealed immediately. Whatever occurred in that room must never be discovered or repeated." Attached to the report was a photograph of Elizabeth Ashford taken during her freshman year. She had a kind face, soft features, and intelligent eyes. In the photograph, she wore a simple white blouse and looked directly at the camera with a slight smile. "They erased her," Dr. Morrison said, her voice shaking. "She died in a horrific way. And they erased her from history to avoid scandal. They removed her from the graduation ceremony records, sealed her room, and pretended she never existed." "Except she did exist," I said. "And she appears in these photographs from graduation day. How is that possible if she died before the ceremony?" "Unless," Dr. Morrison said slowly, "she went to her graduation anyway. Her spirit, her ghost, whatever you want to call it. She had worked for 4 years to graduate. She was not going to miss it just because she was dead." Over the following weeks, we continued to monitor the photographs, and they continued to change. The headless woman moved progressively closer in every image. In the procession photograph, she moved from the second position to the first, then appeared to begin separating from the line, turning toward the camera. In the final photograph, she now stood in the very foreground, her headless body facing the camera directly, as if she were about to step out of the frame entirely. And something else changed. Where her head should have been, a shape began to form. Not a clear head, but a suggestion of features, a darkness arranged in a pattern that almost resembled a face. Eyes, perhaps, a mouth, watching, waiting. Dr. Morrison and I debated what to do. Should we destroy the photographs? Seal them away as Elizabeth's room had been sealed? Report what we'd found to someone? But we knew no one would believe us. And something else troubled me. I felt that Elizabeth was trying to communicate something. She had been erased from history, her death covered up, her existence denied. Perhaps she wanted recognition. Perhaps she wanted justice. Perhaps she simply wanted to be acknowledged. I decided to do something that Dr. Morrison thought was foolish, possibly dangerous. I sat alone in the archives late one night, with the graduation procession photograph displayed on my screen. I stared at the headless woman, at Elizabeth Ashford, and spoke aloud. "Elizabeth, I know who you are. I know what happened to you. I know they erased you from the records and pretended you never existed. I'm sorry for what was done to you. I'm sorry you died before you could graduate. But I see you. I acknowledge you. You were real. You existed. You mattered." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then as I watched the photograph, something changed. The darkness where Elizabeth's head should have been began to resolve into clearer features. I could see the outline of a face now, the same face from her freshman photograph. Kind, soft, intelligent. Her eyes looked directly at me through the screen, and I felt a presence in the room, gentle but profound. The shape that suggested her mouth seemed to move, and though I heard no sound, I understood what she was saying. "Thank you." Then, gradually, her form in the photograph began to fade. Not disappearing entirely, but becoming translucent, ethereal. Within minutes, she was barely visible. A ghost in an old photograph, finally acknowledged, finally at peace. I checked the other photographs from that day. In all of them, Elizabeth's figure had faded to the point of being almost invisible. The distortions, the voids, the approaching presence, all had diminished. She was still there if you looked closely, but she was no longer aggressively present, no longer moving closer, no longer demanding attention. Dr. Morrison and I wrote a comprehensive report documenting Elizabeth Ashford's existence, her death, and the institutional cover-up. We submitted it to the college president with a recommendation that Elizabeth be formally recognized as a member of the class of 1905, posthumously awarded her degree, and properly memorialized. After much discussion and examination of our evidence, the college agreed. In a quiet ceremony attended by Elizabeth's descendants, who had been told she had withdrawn due to illness and never knew the truth, Wellesley College formally recognized Elizabeth Ashford as a graduate of the class of 1905. A plaque was installed in Tower Hall commemorating her. Her name was added to the official graduation records. Her story, or at least the parts we could share publicly, was documented in the college archives, and the photographs stopped changing. Elizabeth's figure remains visible in the images if you know where to look, but she no longer moves, no longer approaches, no longer demands attention. She is simply there, a ghostly presence in old photographs, finally acknowledged, finally given the recognition that was denied her in death. But there's one thing I didn't include in my official report. One thing I've never told anyone except Dr. Morrison. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm working in the archives, I see movement in the photographs. Not aggressive movement like before, just gentle shifts, Elizabeth appearing to turn her head when her head is visible, or seeming to smile, or looking at something beyond the camera. And occasionally, on the anniversary of her death, June 9th, her figure becomes clearer in the photographs, her head fully visible, her features distinct, looking directly at the camera, directly at me, with an expression of gratitude and peace. She's still there, still watching, but no longer forgotten, no longer erased, no longer moving closer with every glance, because she has finally been seen. The archivists who work in the Wellesley archives now all know about Elizabeth. We keep the photographs in a special collection, properly preserved and properly labeled. When researchers ask about the faint figure visible in the graduation photos, we tell them the truth. She's Elizabeth Ashford, class of 1905, who died tragically before graduation, but whose spirit attended the ceremony anyway, and who waited over a century to be properly acknowledged. Some say if you stare long enough at the graduation procession photograph, her head slowly begins to reappear, looking directly at you. This is true. I've seen it happen, but it's not threatening. It's her way of saying hello, of reminding us that she's still here, still part of the college's history, still deserving of recognition. Elizabeth Ashford existed. She was real. She mattered. And now, finally, she is remembered. I sometimes wonder what really happened to her in that dormitory room in 1905. How did she die? What caused her head to be severed with no blood, no violence, no trace? Was it something supernatural? Something medical that they didn't understand? An accident that was too horrific to explain? I'll probably never know. The sealed room was reopened in 1908, and any evidence was likely destroyed. The confidential report provides no details beyond the bare facts. But I like to think that Elizabeth attended her graduation ceremony that day in 1905, present even though she had died hours before. I like to think she walked in that procession with her classmates, headless but determined, refusing to let death deny her the achievement she had worked 4 years to attain. And I like to think that she remained in those photographs all these years, slowly moving closer, slowly becoming more prominent, slowly demanding attention, until finally someone noticed her, acknowledged her, and gave her the recognition she deserved. The photographs hang in my office now. I look at them often. And sometimes I see Elizabeth looking back at me, her head clearly visible, her expression peaceful. She graduated. She was acknowledged. She is remembered. And she is, finally, at rest. But she's still there in the photographs, still watching, still reminding us that history is full of stories that were erased, people who were forgotten, truths that were buried. And sometimes, if you look closely enough at old photographs, you can find those lost stories waiting to be discovered, waiting to be told, waiting to be remembered. Elizabeth Ashford is one of those stories, and now her story has been told. 5 years after discovering Elizabeth's photographs, I was promoted to Director of Archives at Wellesley. One of my first acts was to create a permanent exhibition about students whose stories had been suppressed or forgotten, Elizabeth Ashford chief among them. The exhibition includes the graduation photographs, properly restored and displayed with full context. Visitors can see Elizabeth's faint figure in the images and can read about what happened to her and why she was erased from college records. The exhibition has become one of our most popular. Students, faculty, and visitors come to see the photographs and learn about Elizabeth. Many report that they can see her more clearly the longer they look, her head appearing gradually, her features becoming distinct, her eyes looking directly at them. Some find this frightening, but most understand what I understand. Elizabeth is simply acknowledging those who acknowledge her. She spent over a century being unseen, being erased, being forgotten. Now she wants to be seen, and we see her. We remember her. We honor her. On the 120th anniversary of her death, the college held a memorial service for Elizabeth. Over 100 people attended, students, faculty, alumni, and several of Elizabeth's descendants who had recently learned the truth about how she died. During the service, several people reported seeing a woman in old-fashioned graduation robes standing at the back of the chapel. She had her head, they said. She was smiling. And when the service ended and people turned to greet her, she was gone. I believe it was Elizabeth. I believe she attended her own memorial, just as she had attended her own graduation over a century ago. And I believe she was pleased that finally, she was being remembered. The photographs remain in the archives, properly preserved and properly honored. Elizabeth remains in them, visible to those who take the time to look carefully, to acknowledge her presence, to remember her story. She exists in those images. She always will. But now she exists not as a horror or a mystery, but as a person, a woman who died tragically, who was erased unjustly, and who refused to be forgotten. Elizabeth Ashford, class of 1905, scholar, student, graduate, remembered. And in the photographs, if you look closely, you can see her smiling. This 1905 college photo looked normal until they saw one of the students doesn't have a head, until they realized she had been dead before the ceremony, but attended anyway, until they discovered she had been erased from all records, her existence denied, her memory suppressed, until they understood she was slowly moving closer in every photograph, demanding to be seen, demanding to be acknowledged, demanding to be remembered. And now she is. Elizabeth Ashford is remembered, her story is told, and her spirit, finally acknowledged, finally at peace, remains visible in those old photographs, a reminder that every life matters, every person deserves recognition, and some stories refuse to stay buried, no matter how hard history tries to erase them. Look closely at the graduation procession photograph. Look at the figure near the center with no head. Keep looking, and gradually, If you look long enough with respect and acknowledgment, her head will begin to appear. She's looking at you. She sees you seeing her. And she is grateful. Elizabeth Ashford graduated. Elizabeth Ashford existed. Elizabeth Ashford mattered. And now, everyone knows.